And welcome, folks, to a special edition of Space Talks with Z. Today, I've got with us Ken Peterman, President of Government Systems of Viasat. Thank you, Ken, very much for joining us today. Ken is the special guest and co-host of the Space Innovation Symposium, part of America Future Series' class symposium, which is Cyber, Land, Air, Sea, and Space, which will be occurring starting April 6th. And the second day of the Space Symposium will be the 7th. We also have events on the 13th, 20th, 27th, and 28th. Please check that out at the links below. It's going to be several days full of amazing discussions that are pertinent to national security and America's success moving forward. Again, thank you, Ken, for joining us. Ken Peterman is the president of Viasat's government systems. He has over 40 years of experience and has helped shape the strategic defense landscape in tactical and satellite communications, working primarily in what is known as C4, cybersecurity, command, control, communications, and computers. He's trained as an electrical engineer from Tri-State University and has also gone through executive programs at Stanford and Penn State. He, in his professional life, did 21 years with Raytheon, then went into senior leadership at Rockwell Collins, was president of ITT Communications, and also president of Excelis, both L3 Harris companies, and is now president of Viasat Government Systems. Thank you, Ken, for taking some time with us today. Viasat is an amazing company in the commercial side of space and satellite communications, but serving the government. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got here and what your path was from a student, of electrical engineering all the way through to senior leadership, executive leadership, in telecommunications and security?
Well, thank you, Z. I'll tell you that I didn't plot this course. No one could have plotted the course that I've been fortunate enough to embark on in terms of this journey that is my professional career. But first, let me say thank you. Thank you for hosting me today. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for putting forth this Space Innovation Summit. I think that this is a fantastic venue. There's a lot going on in space right now, and as a Viasat is pleased to be a sponsor and pleased to participate in a big way. So thank you for hosting that. See, that's fantastic.
It's our honor.
I will tell you that, when I graduated from electrical engineer with an electrical engineering degree, I can tell you that all the cool stuff happening 40 years ago was in the defense and aerospace market. We were inventing things that had never been done before. We were inventing GPS. We were inventing satellite communications. We were inventing mobile networking and cybersecurity. All of these things were born out of a compelling need to keep our warfighters connected, to provide them a secure communications mechanism, to provide them situational awareness so that they knew what was going on in the world around them, and to be able to do it in a way where the information was trusted and there was security in the sense of the communications network that was provided. And these things were hard. These things were hard problems to solve. So perhaps it's a little nostalgic, but the defense industrial base that I joined in about 1980 was the Silicon Valley of the day in terms of inventing things that have never been done before. It was a challenging place to be. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and I started, interestingly enough, on a satellite communications program called the Flaming Arrow Net. It was the MSC 64 UHF SATCOM terminal, and this is when a SATCOM terminal sat in a shelter on the back of a 2.5-ton truck.
Wow!
And as you know, a UHF SATCOM terminal today could be built in something the size of almost the size of a smartphone with an antenna. So the world has changed a lot in the time that we've moved through this, and it's been a fascinating ride for me and very exciting. It's interestingly enough too that very first program I worked on, Viasat's founder, Mark Dankberg, as well as several other current Viasat early employees, were part of that program, and they built the UHF DAMA SATCOM modem for that flaming AeroNet terminal. And that's when I first met Mark Dankberg and Mark Miller and Steve Hart, who were the three founders of Viasat. And they founded the company about 5 years later in 1986.
Wow.
So that's
So it's
been
come full circle for you. How
it's,
amazing.
it's absolutely come full circle. And as you said, I was the president of ITT's communications and electronic warfare business that later spun out of ITT to be Excelis and then was acquired by L3Harris. But when I left there, Mark notified me right away and said, "What are you going to do next?" And through a couple of conversations, here I am at Viasat now in my 8th year as the president of Viasat's defense business. And you're right, it's absolutely come full circle, and it's been an amazing ride.
So, I had a few questions prepared, but you mentioned something that is really fascinating. That 40 years ago, defense was the Silicon Valley of the world. And of course, 20 years ago, Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley of the world. But now it feels like space may be that next major driver with the democratization of launch that has happened here. What is really exciting to you right now about that in general and perhaps in specific?
Well, there's a wide array of things that are exciting about that. But one thing is I've kind of my career's a little bit in 2 chapters. The first chapter, I discussed the fact that we're inventing things that never been done before.
Right.
And we're doing it to empower our young sons and daughters in uniform and to keep them safe. The second half of my career, the most recent, perhaps 20 years, these technologies, satellite communications, mobile networking, cybersecurity, the private sector embraced these technologies and used them to empower us in our civilian lives.
Right.
And this is where cellular and mobile phones came from, and then 2G and 3G and 4G and 5G became a commercially driven market to connect the unconnected, to empower people with the power of the cloud and all the apps that have been given birth. Whether it's navigation apps, whether it's proactive tipping and queuing, whether it's all of these things are enabled by cloud connectivity and that kind of thing.
Right.
So this technology leadership now is in the private sector, and you see the private sector exploiting the opportunities in space in terms of LEO, MEO, and GEO. Things are being done in those orbital regimes that have never been done before, and they're being done at a pace using agile development models and commercial and private sector funding that moves so much faster than a defense acquisition system can move. And remember, our defense acquisition system, it has a noble history of doing things that have never been done before, but it is a bureaucratic process that involves a multi-year validation of a new requirement. It involves then a multi-year budgeting process, and then typically a multi-year development. It's all predicated in large part on a process of inventing something that's never been done. Right. And we have now in our recent history is we have companies that have stood up and have the wherewithal, broad enough shoulders, if you will, to be able to enter the space launch business from a commercial perspective, and to drive down the cost of space launch and to make launch available to everyone, such that all companies can have access now to affordable access to space. And you see companies building LEO constellations and MEO constellations. Companies like Viasat are building GEO constellations with unprecedented capacity. And in fact, in a warfighter context, unprecedented resilience and security and anti-jam and resistance or resilience to adversary threats, whether they be ground threats or other kinds of threats, cyber, whatever. So the private sector is moving now so rapidly that one of the challenges that confront us all, if we're going to continue to empower our sons and daughters in uniform with this kind of cutting edge technology, is to adapt an acquisition system so it can move more rapidly and can rapidly assess these private sector capabilities assess them in a warfighter context and against a warfighter use case. Then adopt or adapt those capabilities rapidly and put them to use in an effective way. In a sense, that's kind of what I would call a technology dividend that is a yet untapped opportunity for DoD and the American taxpayer for DoD to selectively get out of the invention business. And in fact, part of the reason to get out of it is because this technology doesn't have to be invented anymore by the defense industrial base. They can tap into these private sector capabilities. But in addition to that, you could probably make a case that it is inappropriate for DoD to compete with the private sector in capabilities that the private sector can readily do. And the 2010 space policy, which was revitalized and renewed in 2018, states that we should seek to exploit the private sector to the advantage of the taxpayer and our men and women in uniform. And I think some of us are trying to drive the transformational change in policy and practice, as well as in culture, to make that a reality.
Well, now you mentioned acquisition, and looking at the news, Viasat has had a couple major contracts it's reached and pieces of work it's won from the Department of Defense. Can you perhaps tell us a little bit about that and other recent developments with Viasat and their support in that process of acquisition and supporting the warfighter?
Sure. So this company that Mark Dankberg and the other two founders gave birth to in 1986 has a unique culture of innovation and unleashing the creativity of engineers and in many cases veterans. About 40% of the employees that are part of my organization are veterans. So they're very passionate about bringing these cutting edge technologies back to their brethren in uniform in order to enable them to harness the power of cloud connectivity, to operate in missions and ConOps that are otherwise unprecedented and haven't been able to be done before, and to do it more safely than ever before. So the opportunities that are coming to Viasat in this defense domain, to a large degree, are not based on a government issued request for information or request for proposal. In large part, it is the combining of our veteran employees with our engineers and technologists, and them challenging each other to solve the hard problems that the warfighter faces when they're at the tactical edge or executing the business of this nation. And so, in many ways, we're dealing with the hard problems that need to be solved, and we're dealing them in an innovative way. And so then we proactively we study and analyze these opportunities. We create what we call a minimally viable product that tests and validates the feasibility of the concept, and then we bring that forward to our defense community and our senior leader community proactively in an entrepreneurial way, and we find that they immediately, in many cases, they immediately embrace these cutting edge thought leadership ideas, technology leadership ideas, and look to put them to work and deploy them in an accelerated way. So many of our opportunities are coming from that kind of a unique culture of innovation, unleashing the passion of our veterans as well as our technologists and engineers, and then proactively bringing that forward to solve DoD's toughest problems. So for example, we're involved in tactical data links. We're a leader in that, but we found that there was a clear opportunity, especially in joint tactical air control, to do machine to machine syncing between the JTAC on the ground and the close air support of the aircraft. But it required a tactical data link terminal that could directly connect to that close air support aircraft on a machine-to-machine basis, so that no human had to be involved, and it could be done in seconds instead of tens of minutes. Okay, right. And so we proactively created a handheld Link 16 tactical data link terminal, and that's the kind of thing that we're doing entrepreneurially. We're doing the same thing in space. We looked at developing low Earth orbit, or LEO, satellites that can provide a tactical data link range extension, that can provide gateways in space, can do LEO to GEO so that we can transmit from LEOs up to GEO and back down. That way, the data that transverses our networks uh, has assured connectivity with low latency to that warfighter on the ground, and it avoids the vulnerability of large, exquisite teleports on the ground that an adversary could attack kinetically, could attack with a cyber or power cut or those kinds of things. So we look innovatively to create these capabilities, and we're just seeing an enormous number of opportunities, whether they are in mobile networking, cybersecurity, space, and other domains. And I think in large part we see uh, our technologies as being relevant in multi-domain operations, whether it's the traditional domains of land and sea and
Right.
air, or whether it's the emergent domains of space, connectivity, cyber, and those kinds of things.
So let's stay with the multi-domain operations for a moment, because one of the one of the things that is emerging, and certainly with the creation of the Space Force, was a dramatic show of the relevance of space as another domain of warfighting. We have had the traditional land, sea, air. Uh, Cybersecurity is now viewed as a fourth domain, and space possibly could be the fifth domain. But cybersecurity and space are so tightly linked. So with all of this going on, what is the approach that Viasat takes, and in particular, are there opportunities that you see to serve our defense personnel?
Sure. And so let me go back and remind you that our acquisition system in DoD is predicated on the process of invention, largely. Okay.
Right.
So a complicated ecosystem like satellite communications that involves a space segment, a ground segment, user terminals, uh, control of the satellite and network management, cybersecurity, all those things. In many cases, the historical approach has been to break that ecosystem down and let multiple contracts for different pieces of that ecosystem, and then for DoD to put it back together. We did the same thing in 1960s when President Kennedy challenged this nation to put an astronaut on the moon.
That's
NASA,
right.
NASA incredibly got that done by the end of the 60s, but they did it by breaking that problem set down and probably letting thousands of contracts that invented everything from the rocket engine to the spacesuit to the
That's
communications
right. That's right.
to Tang the breakfast drink. Okay, it all
Some of
had
the
to,
companies you worked for, Raytheon, Rockwell.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Although I wasn't yet active in the engineering community in
No,
1960,
no,
I was
certainly,
thinking
certainly,
about
but
it. I was at that point in my time. I was a young STEM student, and I was clearly an Imagineer, but yet not yet an engineer. Okay, I'm still an Imagineer, Z, still, but today companies like SpaceX and others can provide that launch capability
right.
themselves. Companies like Viasat can provide an entire space ecosystem, including the space segment, the ground infrastructure, the user terminals, and everything. So what that enables us to do is to optimize that entire ecosystem such that every element of the ecosystem is optimized to support the customer experience and the mission outcome, and then to provide a cybersecurity overlay that's integrated into that. And that turnkey capability performs in a far superior way than a federated solution that's patched together where maybe 10 or 100 different contractors were involved. Okay, and so Viasat is a leader in that regards. You know, we've grown from 3 founders today, maybe 5,000 or more employees, and we fielded in 2011 a satellite that had 140 gigabits per second of capacity. State of the art at the time was about 5. Okay, and we did it by architecting the satellite in a completely different and innovative way, and that was just our Viasat-1 satellite. Our Viasat-2 satellite had twice that capacity, and our Viasat-3 constellation that we'll begin deploying in mid-2022. And then it'll be global. Three satellites will deploy at 6-month intervals beginning in about May 2022, and we'll light up service globally and really move toward connecting the world with a
Right.
turnkey capability that provides that provides the ability to affordably connect the unconnected. And that has a benefit in our commercial market. It has a benefit, obviously, for our warfighters and our sons and daughters in uniform too. And that's really an exciting opportunity for us at Viasat, and we're looking, and it serves both the commercial and the military markets. Now, you talked about a minute ago about space in a commerce sense,
Yes, sir.
and space, and so let me touch on that. I think that um, it is important that all companies have access to space. It's important that space is well managed and well governed, that we deal with the challenges of deep population density at LEO. We have companies that want to launch tens of thousands of satellites at LEO. That poses traffic, congestion, interference. It poses space debris concerns. It poses all of that. So it's very important as a community that we manage and govern in a responsible way the use of space. I'll also say uh, that we see space in many times as what maritime was 1,000 years ago, where maritime, there were sea channels
That's
uh,
right.
through which goods shipped around the world. And those sea channels were policed, and there were rules of the road as ships of all nations pushed traffic and pushed commerce, international commerce around the world. And the navies of the world protected those sea lanes to assure economic
Right.
stability
Right.
and protected those doing business. And in many ways, space is similar to that today, in the sense that the far majority of use in space is commercial, and it's used for the movement of data, the transaction of business, whether it be medical or financial or whatever it might be. And so the protection of space and the governance of space is an important topic for all of us to respect and to be good citizens, as well as be good and responsible users of that space. It also presents an enormous opportunity, because while DoD was originally the dominant user of space
Right.
and that kind of thing, now we see defense communities essentially being not just a minority user, but a fractional user of the enormous capacity that exists in our private sector space constellations. So that, again, it's an opportunity for DoD to harvest this technology dividend and augment the purpose-built military space capabilities that they have with these private sector capabilities, because they can and to roam freely in and among both the private sector as well as the military purpose-built capabilities, in order to provide assured resilience and that kind of thing. Your mobile phone does this today. Your mobile phone is typically simultaneously connected on multiple diverse networks: Wi-Fi,
Right.
cellular, Bluetooth, those kinds of things. And your mobile phone is intelligent you might be running multiple apps simultaneously, and your mobile phone intelligently parses the traffic over whichever one of those networks can best support the use case and the customer experience of the individual app. And we see DoD and the Space Force vision that was issued in December of 2020, I think, of the Space Force's vision of blending commercial and military satellite communications capabilities to provide the warfighter the ability to roam among that. And in fact, I think the U.S. space enterprise vision refers to that as fighting SATCOM, in the sense that these commercial space resources will be employed to support the warfighter.
Right.
And if DoD, DoD's the US DoD's today, their total use case for satellite communications is about 40 gigabits per second. So if you move that to a SpaceX LEO constellation or to a Viasat 3 GEO constellation, it would use a fraction of a percent of the total capacity of that individual network. So
Right.
being able to roam among LEO and MEO and GEO constellations and take advantage of the low latency of LEO when the use case of the app you're running requires that, or take advantage of the bandwidth economics of GEO when your use case demands it. Those are really valuable attributes, and because users only pay for the portion of the network they're using, DoDs now, when they roam among these private sector networks, they're paying a fraction of the cost of the network versus paying the full cost of a military purpose-built network. So there's enormous opportunities to harvest this technology dividend in terms of both resilience, capacity, affordability, and security.
One of the things that sometimes I know people are concerned about is, can a commercial satellite like a Viasat satellite be as secure and as resilient to a possible enemy action as a purpose-built DoD satellite? Now, I know that Viasat has done tremendous amounts of work in that regard. Would you be able to share a little bit about your thoughts in terms of the security and resilience of the satellites and the systems themselves?
Sure. So I'll just explain this at a kind of a high level because
Yes,
it's
of course.
common sense, right? Um, on our network today, let's just say we have several million subscribers, well over 2 million individual devices connected to our satellite communications network every day. And we have so that's a large number of users. The second thing is we have a very diverse set of use cases. We have home residential satellite internet. We have enterprise and business internet. We serve cruise lines. We serve senior leader high profile aircraft. We serve military users. We serve merchant marine. We serve business jets, a wide variety of diverse use cases and subscribers.
Yes.
And that means we have a wide variety and a diverse set of use cases of how people are using our network. So importantly, that also means that we see a very diverse set of cyber threats on our network. Perhaps the most diverse set of anyone operating a satellite network today. We have military users, commercial users, businesses, banks, governments, all that kind of thing. So
Everything that can happen is happening, basically.
everything that can happen is happening. So what we do then, and we harvest, let's say, we probably move 550 to 600 terabytes of traffic over our network every 24 hours.
Spectacular.
If you wanted to push that over a military purpose-built satellite transponder, it would probably take about 2 years. So my point is we move an enormous amount of traffic and we capture and harvest about 30 uh, terabits per second of data every 24 hours and do data analytics on the cyber threats and those kinds of things. So we're able to see on our network, we see sometimes a very unsophisticated threat that might attack a home in Nebraska or some low profile simple user, okay, with use cases. And then we see that threat return 30 or 45 days later. And it's slightly more sophisticated and it's morphed a little bit. And now it attacks a slightly higher priority target, like a small business. A month or two later, we see it in a more polished and sophisticated format, and it attacks a mayor's office in California. And gradually, it's moving up its priority target list and becoming more sophisticated, such that ultimately it might attack a high-profile government user or a military user or something like that. Well, by using big data analytics and analyzing this diverse set of data, and the more data you have and the more diverse your data is, the faster you learn. That's the fundamental nature of machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Yes.
So the fact is, because our data is diverse and our data is so great, we're able to become predictive and anticipate where some of these threats will occur next and what kinds of targets they might be looking for. So we can then create decoy networks or honeypots or those kinds of things that can attract those threats. And then we can learn from them and tease them and stimulate them so that now it starts to become an asymmetrical kind of a situation where this is not just a perimeter defense, but it's a defense in depth. And we're able to actually play a little bit of offense in terms of getting the threat to reveal itself and expose itself so we can learn more about it. And that creates the ability for us to learn faster and actually defend more effectively. So I believe that private sector SATCOM networks like Viasat, actually through the kinds of things I've just described, they're able to, because of the diversity of the user community, the diversity of the use cases, and the diversity of cyber threats that they see, they're actually able to learn faster and potentially offer a better defense than a military purpose-built network that only has a very one-dimensional set of users, one-dimensional set of use cases. Okay.
Well, that's remarkable. And just what comes to mind in that is that because Viasat and perhaps other commercial companies in other use cases have the end-to-end solution rather than being part of a federated solution, as you said earlier, where they're making just a piece. It also enables this system to be self-learning in a much more aggressive fashion,
Well, and
in
we're
a way
able,
that might
right,
never have been
right.
possible before.
And so we're able to use a DevOps model in
Right,
patient this, right? So for example, typically, as we learn about these threats, and that's the threat dimension side of it, we also are constantly learning how our subscribers are using our network because their use case is constantly evolving. So
right.
we're able then to upgrade and optimize our network performance, whether it be from a cyber defense, whether it be from a performance optimization perspective, from a customer experience perspective. We're able to optimize the performance of our network on a continuous basis. And we frequently make updates to our network every 6 hours, every 12 hours, as we're constantly getting smarter about how people are going to, not just how they use our network today, but how they're going to use our network tomorrow and the day after. Okay.
Yep. I don't know if you might even know this, but that delivery cadence is only matched by organizations like Amazon. So that's a really remarkable thing that you've said about your enterprise here, sir, is
Well,
that you're able to
that,
deliver on that scale and with that rapidity of update and improvement.
well, and if you compare it to a DoD federated model where you might have 5 or 10 or 20 contractors involved with 5 or 6 or 7 different acquisition communities, the
Right, right.
opportunity
That's
is
impossible to make.
very challenging to
Yeah.
do an upgrade in a timely way in that environment. And that's why we're arguing, we believe it's important to partner with DoD in order to try to explore together collaboratively the kinds of transformational change that's needed in terms of acquisition so that we can keep our young men and women in uniform on the cutting edge of technology like they were back in the 80s. But today, I think in many ways, we have better cloud connectivity, better empowerment in that sense in the civilian world than we do at the tactical edge. And I think that that's something certainly myself and the 40% of the veterans that comprise my employee base are very passionate about doing. It's one of the reasons that we've been the fastest organically growing defense business in the United States over each of the last 5 years, is because we are proactively trying to address these difficult problems in an entrepreneurial sense, and getting better and better and more effective at it, and becoming recognized not just as a thought leader, but a technology leader that's making a difference for our sons and daughters in uniform.
Oh, that's spectacular. The entrepreneurship model and the agility is something that people should be learning from. I want to take us a little bit out and generalize a little bit more. One thing that I know you've commented about is how important competition is to the long-term viability of space commerce. And in so many ways, Viasat is enabling that by providing a communications platform. Could you share a little bit more of your thoughts in regards to making sure that space has a democratic access and that there's competition in commerce?
Yeah, I think that one of the strengths of our American people and culture in our history has been the innovative spirit of the American engineer, the American business entrepreneur. And it's important that we keep the door open for innovative technologies and innovative concepts, and that we make sure that those that follow us have access to space as well. So I think that while we need standards and while we need responsible management and governance of the space domain, we also have to make sure that we don't issue mandates that stifle competition, that stifle innovation, or stifle creativity, because that's a strength. That's a strength of ourselves in America. It's a strength of the entire Western ecosystem.
No, thank you. I mean, that's critical. One other thing that I was going to ask you about, although we've touched on it a couple times already, is the acquisition policy. Um, are there opportunities that you see, perhaps you've talked about it in general, but specifically with the space economy and the drive to capture strategic advantage, the high ground, as it were, in space?
Mhm.
Um, what should governments and non-commercial space organizations be doing? I mean, you've mentioned the public-private partnership,
Yeah.
exploring together, and others. Would you have some specific recommendations, perhaps?
Yeah, I do. And I think that, first of all, there's not a simple answer, but I can
Right.
give you a simple analogy, okay, that I think we can all understand and work toward. So if I, instead of talking about space, okay, let me talk about the automobile, okay, and
Yes.
as a transformation resource, as a transportation resource, and I think that it will help us understand. And I'll reconnect it to space in a minute. Uh, when the government invented satellite communications in order to solve beyond line of sight connectivity challenges. So an analogy of a car. Let's say, for example, that the government invented a car, and they invented a car because there was no one else that had the wherewithal to do that. So they invented the automobile, and so the government would specify an automobile and have a competition to build it at lowest price. Now, that worked for a while. And what the government would do then is they would have SUVs, or they'd have automobiles that were two-door pickup trucks, whatever they needed in different types. And it was basically build to print kind of contracts at low price. Well, then when the technology started to change rapidly and the private sector engaged, and you saw vehicles of different types and vehicles that had electric engines and those kinds of things, all of a sudden the opportunity for the government was to lease, not buy. Okay, they
Right.
did not have to invent anymore. They could buy cars from others, or even lease cars, and then roll the technology every 2 or 3 years and renew the lease and keep our warfighters with a cutting edge, fresh new car that had the latest features and the latest safety attributes and the latest technologies. Okay, so leasing became smarter than buying. The problem with leasing is DoD never knows globally where the fight's going to break out. So you
Right.
have to lease cars in multiple geographies, and you have to hold all that inventory at enormous cost. And you never know quite how many SUVs versus how many two doors versus how many whatever it might be, right? So you have to gamble that the mix and the different types are right. So technology keeps moving forward, and now we start innovating business models. Along comes Uber. Guess what? I don't need to own any cars. Okay. Whenever I need a ride, I download the app.
Right. You're
And
buying the ride.
I download the app. The app is free. Okay. Now I only pay for a ride when I need a ride. Okay. And I call for a ride. And if I need a ride that has a pickup truck or an SUV or a sports car, a luxury car, because it's date night with my wife or whatever it might be, I can call for the specific car I need, and I only pay for for that particular ride. Okay. And by the way, that model scales. Okay. Because now if the fight breaks out in a certain geography and I need 75 rides in the next 15 minutes, I can probably call for that. And that inventory is there, because when that inventory is not serving the DoD, the
Serving
inventory
somebody else.
it's serving the commercial market. So DoD just has to, they might pay a little premium to have that priority, but the fact is the opportunity is there. Now one says, well, what about competition? Well, instead of competing to buy cars on price, we should download the Uber app, the satellite version of the Uber app. We should download the satellite version of the Lyft app. We should download the satellite version of these other apps, because we can have competition on a ride by
Right.
ride basis. So, for example, I can stand on the street corner and say, I need a ride from here to the train station. And I can activate the Uber app and ask for the ride. I can activate the Lyft app and ask for a ride. And one ride costs $2 more, but the car gets here 2 minutes earlier. And by the way, it's a nicer car. And I can make a decision on a case by case basis, on a competitive basis, which ride I prefer at this particular point in time. So now
So you actually have far more options.
this is the technology dividend that I keep talking about in terms of space. DoD has the opportunity they've never had before, because the capacity, the resilience, the diversity of technology solutions that exist in space, LEO, MEO, GEO, the opportunity's never been better for DoD. But what they've got to do is adapt their acquisition model such that they can access all of those choices and compete those choices, I'm going to argue, at the Uber app or the Lyft app level, okay, so that DoD no longer has to hold satellite capacity all over the world in case they need it. And then it becomes aging in terms of its technology. DoD can always access the cutting edge technology by simply leveraging the enormous capacity, innovation, and resources that exist in space by the private sector. Now, that's not to say that they shouldn't have a military purpose-built system that they also use as a companion. But I'm only saying the opportunity exists that's never existed before for DoD to take advantage and exploit the private sector's investment and technology trajectory in space.
No, that's thank you for that analogy. That actually makes it really clear in terms of the changes
Now,
that.
let me make one more Z. Let me make one
Yeah,
more
yeah,
point.
of course, of course. Please.
Some in DoD would say, well, we want to be Uber, okay? And it's going to be a DoD Uber Act. Well, the problem is DoD can't serve the commercial market. So if
Right.
DoD's Uber app is going to offer the same affordability and the same scalability of having lots of rides in the place where they need it at any point in time, the advantages are lost if DoD tries to compete with Uber and compete with Lyft by creating their own app. That's not necessary. They simply need to compete at the Uber, the Lyft, and these other rideshare applications.
No, it's a really spectacular analogy because it gets to the heart of the change in mindset that needs to occur to make this
And it's
possible.
true because it's not. I don't know that it's so much acquisition policy practice that has to change. It's acquisition culture because
Right.
again, there is this noble history in our acquisition community of inventing things that have never been done before, and it's very hard for DoD to get out of its own way and harvest this technology dividend in space that's available because
Right.
of the private sector's investment in technology trajectory.
Right. And perhaps thinking about these things as acquiring outcomes and services as opposed to acquiring things, which is perhaps the more traditional way of thinking about it.
Exactly right. I'll give you another analogy. I referred earlier in this interview about the amazing achievement in the 60s of putting an astronaut on the moon.
Yes. Yes.
And the remarkable invention of all the technologies that were required to do that. I would submit to you today that if NASA wanted to put an astronaut on the moon or on Mars, okay, they could issue a one-page statement of objectives specifying the outcome, okay? 3-person crew, we want to leave in 36 months. We want to go to Mars. We want to get 2 tons of rock and we want to return safely. And we want to be in communications to our astronauts on a continual basis. I'm not sure I need to say much more than that, okay? Now, you would have 5 companies that'd be willing to bid on that have the technology and the financial resources to do that, okay? You have, I don't know, I could list them, but I think we could all list them, okay? My
Yes.
point is, each of those companies would issue the following guidance. I'll bid on this. I'm going to give you a great price. It's going to be a safe ride. I'll meet all your objectives. Don't tell me what type of rocket fuel to use. Don't tell me what frequency bands to communicate over. Don't tell me what food to feed the astronauts. Just kind of stay out of the way and let me use the creativity and unleash the innovative capabilities of the private sector to solve this problem for you. Okay. And I think but it's hard. It's hard for an acquisition community with such a noble history to completely outsource something.
Right. To let go.
To let go. It's very difficult.
Yes.
But the winner is the warfighter, the taxpayer, and all concerned. Okay.
Right.
So that's one of the things we have to learn to responsibly do. We have to learn to responsibly make that transformation in the technology sectors that we're talking about.
Right. Those companies may even be willing to do that as a loss leader, right? Not even necessarily bidding their true cost, simply because they want to do it anyways, and this is a way to subsidize what they're going to invest in.
It may be that
once
they put those government astronauts on that trip, it may be that there's certain citizens that'll pay a premium to say, I want to go on that trip too. And
that's right.
It may be the first flight doesn't make money, but the flights that come after that do.
That's right.
Especially if those flights go to that place, mine exotic metals and things like that, and bring it back. Now, all of a sudden, that company can leverage that first use case to open up a market and become create a financial
return. Right. That company has an edge at that point. Thank you so much for those analogies. It's really spectacular. We're coming to the end of our hour here. What I wanted to do is just ask again about future plans that you have for Viasat. It seems like there's just a lot of exciting uh, things going on, and just I would love to hear that about what you see your team doing in the near and a little farther future.
Well, in the commercial market, we're going to connect the unconnected around the world. We're going to do it affordably, and we're going to do it with unprecedented speed and capacity and security. We're going to play a big role in the Internet of Things in the commercial market. And because it takes capacity, speed, security to do that. And we believe that space plays a vital role in that. From a defense perspective, we're going to leverage those same technologies to create and support and connect the Internet of Battlefield Things, swarms of sensors, swarms of unmanned vehicles, those kinds of things. Those kinds of operational concepts require unprecedented connectivity that's resilient and secure. And we think that Viasat is in a extremely well positioned from a technology and a people and a culture perspective, and able to put our unleash the passion of our veterans and our engineers to connect the Internet of Battlefield Things and create unprecedented capabilities as well as safety for our young men and women in uniform.
That's
Satellites LEO, MEO, and GEO are all part of that.
Well, that sounds supremely exciting. We're going to be watching with eyes peeled for announcements as to what Viasat is doing next. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today. We really look forward to your participation at the Space Innovation Symposium on April 6th and 7th. Part of America's Future Series is Class Symposium. That's cyber, land, air, sea, and space, covering all 5 domains that are integral to national security and defense. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Z, and I'll tell you that your American Future Series is fantastic. We are thrilled to be a participant. We're honored to be a sponsor, and we love what you and David Hamilton and the team are doing. So keep up the good work on your side, and we're going to keep bringing you innovative things that blow you away.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Folks, there you have it. Another episode of Space Talks with Z in the books, and we look forward to all of you joining us for the class symposium. Take care. Bye.